Good afternoon.
Hello, Claire. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for coming on. So today on our Spotlight On series, we're talking to Fionnuala Doherty, who's the owner of Infinite You.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Yes, so I am a spiritual life and business coach. I am a yoga teacher, I am a Reiki master, and I'm also a retreat space holder. So a very multi-passionate lady.
That's a lot of things. That's quite cool. How did you end up in that line of work? It's not probably something that you'd normally hear from your school counselor when you're in, doing your exams at 16.
Definitely not. And it makes so much sense now why I really struggled to figure out what I actually wanted to do when I was 16 years old, because there was probably always a yearning inside of me. I always knew that I wanted to help people. And so initially, I did my psychology degree and I worked in the charity sector as an MST therapist. So that was kind of the beginning of my career, and it really did make me realize that I loved being of support to other people. And I had an amazing manager at that time who supported me so much. And I suppose probably in ways also really helped me to believe in myself and the work that I was doing. And I took a little break from that job because I decided to do some travel. And really, at that time, I thought that I was going to be on a pathway to take me into becoming an educational psychologist. And that was the dream that I had. And that's what I was really working towards. And once I took a break from that role, I realized, firstly, how stressed out I was. And sometimes within the charity sector, there can be this I suppose, pressure that we have to give all of ourselves, and it's almost like expected that that's the given with the role, that we don't really think about ourselves, and we often just have to give so much to everybody else. And so I took a little bit of a complete change in my career. So once I came out here, I worked in recruitment and construction, which was very random, and helped a man who I knew from home to really start out his business over here from the very, very beginning. Um, and then I went on my own kind of journey with my own mental health and learning how to look after myself. I suddenly lost a parent while I was over here, and so then things shifted again, and I started to practice yoga more often. I started to have a coach myself. And once I got to a space where I was feeling really well again, I just had this really deep desire, really big, deep desire to be of support to other people again. And it became so big that I couldn't deny it anymore, that was becoming my way. And so even though I loved my job here and loved the person that I was working with in Australia in that recruitment role, I just knew that I had to listen to my own way. So I then shifted and started my own business. And now here we are 3 years later.
I mean, that's a pretty big journey to go on, especially from like moving overseas and obviously like having the death of a parent and like I'm laughing a little bit with construction and recruitment because obviously I'm Irish as well, and it's like, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But that's such an interesting journey, and I think inspirational to listen to that. It's like this wasn't working, but instead of giving up, I kind of kept going and then found, where I get to. And I guess is that something you probably find a lot working with clients, is that being stuck doesn't necessarily mean quitting. It means maybe rethinking.
Absolutely. And in relation to the area of career, often we can get really stuck that it has in that place of feeling like it has to look one way, or it has to be this certain path that we chose when we were 16, 17 years old that we were supposed to do for the rest of our lives. And it's so amazing that things are changing within that realm, that we're starting to learn that, we're not really designed for that a lot of the time. And especially if you're like me and multi-passionate and that desire to do things a little bit differently. I think it's so powerful that we get to choose what that looks like now. And so I often see with clients that stuckness comes from that place of allowing yourself to believe that there is another possibility, or that things could look a different way, or that you do have gifts inside that are really wanting to be birthed through you. and trusting in that desire and not feeling as though you have to stay in that place of stuckness just because you decided when you were 17 or whatever age that that was going to be your career path for life.
100%. Like at one point, I think in my previous life, I wanted to be a teacher, and I now work in IT account management. It's not even close.
Completely different.
It's
Yeah.
not even remotely related.
Yeah.
I don't know why I wanted to be a teacher. It's a very tough job, and I don't think I'd be the right fit for it. And I obviously got over that by the time I was applying to university. But yeah, I think you're totally right. Sometimes, we make decisions about what course we're going to do in college from a really young age. And what I'm seeing a lot in our generation in particular is people going back to education or reskilling and kind of going, actually, I did that for 10 years and I'm going to move on. It's becoming, I think, more common.
Absolutely. And I think travel as well can often be something that changes a trajectory as well, because you start to realize that there's so many opportunities out there and you've already made a decision that's not following the norm of, the thing that we're brought up with of get your job, get married, have kids, build your house, and then that's kind of life. Like there's so many other ways that you can do it if you want to, and of course that might be your journey, and that's amazing too if that's what you want it to look like. But it doesn't have to be that way, and it can absolutely be different if you're feeling that pull or that call to change things around.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously, as a business owner, you have the spiritual space, but also the business space. And something that we see quite often in not just corporate world, but in venture capitalist investment is a massive gender disparity across C-suite and funding and all of that. Why do you think that we see that so prevalently, particularly in certain industries?
I think that we're still recovering from the oppressive systems that have dominated society for such a long time, the patriarchy, capitalism, all of the things. And women are in a place right now where there is so much movement. And I think it's actually a really amazing time to be a woman in business right now, because there are more and more advocates for us who are showing up and shifting things and changing the world to be more equal in so many ways. But I think that process of shifting those paradigms that have been around for such a long time has been a really challenging journey for women. And it is so amazing to see that shifts are happening. But of course, in many ways, that can feel quite slow. And a lot of the problems can be that the men who were a part of those systems are often still the ones who are in power in organizations. And I suppose that's what creates the cultures then that we get brought into in the beginning of our career journeys. And even the mindsets that we can end up having based on our upbringing or examples that we have had, because it's really only our generation that have started to properly shift and change things. And so we don't have the same examples that men have, that pathway is even available or possible for us. It's so much easier to see that as a man, and it's almost like a given. And I'm certainly not an expert on the subject, but those are the things that I have really noticed and seen for myself in this world. But I try not to get too stuck in it, because I think that it's so important to remember that things are changing and that we have to be the people who lead the way and who shift things for the better. And I certainly have so many examples of women in my life right now who have been such a role model for me within that space of it is actually possible to be a woman who is a successful business owner, who makes great money, and who doesn't have to be afraid of the fact that that is possible or true for them. And I think it's just such a great time for us to be continuing to move forwards in this space.
100%. And I would tend to agree on a lot of that, where it's interesting seeing the shift and the change, where it is like even talking to, say, like my grandparents, like, when they were still around, and like the life that my grandmother had, even though we both lived in Ireland, like in Dublin, was just like an alien concept to the kind of life that's available to me. And like, not even in terms of available in terms of like modern technology and all that, but like in terms of legislation and like opportunities and that kind of stuff. It's just a totally different world now, which is great. And we are seeing that change. And what's been really encouraging for me doing these kind of conversations, these kind of interviews, is that a lot of men, particularly of our generation, are very pro the change. Like a lot of them want a better system, a newer system, a more modern system, which I think is very encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so great to see that happen. When you mentioned your granny, my granny was the first person in my local community to go to university. She studied to become a teacher, and listening to her experience of that and experience of then going for roles as someone who was going to be getting married and all of the things, it's just so amazing to hear how things have shifted since then. But she was so amazing to be one of the first to do that as well in her time.
That's incredible, because even in that time, going to university at all was a huge deal. So to be with the first woman is amazing.
Yeah, so good.
So cool. So what made you want to get involved with the GU?
A number of things. One of them is sometimes as a sole business owner, you can spend quite a bit of time in your own little world day to day. And so it's so amazing to connect with like-minded women who are doing similar work in the world and who are passionate about these different subjects of empowering women and coming together to make the world a better place in many ways. So that was a big part of it for me, was the knowing that often when we're in business, it doesn't work in isolation. We have to be in community with other women, and it is something that I'm really passionate about in general, is communities of women coming together. It's something that I love to create within my own business. And so that was one of the big draws to wanting to become part of your amazing group that you have created, Claire. And then also, I always feel like I learn so much from being around women who are in this industry, in this world. And I always feel like I come away from experiences where I'm connected with like-minded women with so much more knowledge. And so it's always an absolute yes to be a part of these types of experiences. And I think the whole ethos around why you created this is so important. Your whole message around creating more equality. And so anything that allows me to be a part of that shift is a huge yes for me.
I love that. And on a slightly more personal note, what is something people watching might not know about you?
Something people might not know about me. The first thing that comes to mind is when my mum was here, she was talking about how never in a million years would anyone have expected me to ever become a yoga teacher. Because when I was a teenager, I was the last person who ever did PE, who ever wanted to move off of the sofa or do anything that was in any way energetic. And so all my friends at home as well always say, it's so funny that my job has now become supporting people to move their bodies and connect with it and all of the things, because I was literally the antithesis to that most of my life until I found yoga.
And you're down there at Coogee at 6:15, 4 mornings a week.
Exactly. So yeah, you never know what's around the corner.
Never say never, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
And if someone's watching this and they're kind of looking at you going, oh my God, she's had this amazing journey, and like, you know, she's been brave enough to do this career change, and I want to be able to do something like that, or I want to be able to set up a business, what kind of advice would you give them?
If you're at the very beginning of that journey, allow yourself to explore and allow yourself to take the very initial steps that are going to support you to get there. I think that something that often holds us back is thinking about the very final goal that we have, or the big vision that we have, and the desire often which comes with wanting to be an entrepreneur, of shifting or changing the world in some way, and or being part of a change. And often that big vision can hold us back from actually taking the very initial steps that we need to take, because it can feel like it's so far away, or it's almost like far-fetched, as if how are we ever going to get there? And so I think it's so important to just strip it back to allowing yourself to explore what the initial steps would be, what you would need to start to do in order to take some little baby steps that move you forwards towards that dream or that desire, whether that be exploring course options or looking at what it is that you want to do and playing with different options, and yeah, taking those very initial steps that will support you to get there. I also believe that it is so important to have support. I didn't do any of this alone, and whilst you could try it, and definitely is not something that I recommend. I tried to do it initially on my own, and as soon as I started to get support, I was like, why have I tried to struggle through this by myself for so long? Because my area of genius is my coaching. It's the work I do. It's being in that space that I love. It is certainly not business. It has got much better as I have journeyed along and figured things out. And now there's many business things. But getting support was a thing that allowed me to learn how to actually set up a business, how to do the things. And so we can put so much pressure on ourselves to try and figure it all out alone, and you really don't need to do that. So give yourself permission to get support, and follow your dreams, because there is nothing that will light you up more than doing work that gives you purpose and connects you to your soul and gives you a bigger mission in life. It has been so life transforming for me, and I am so grateful that I get to do this work every single day. So definitely don't push down that burning desire inside of yourself.
Amazing advice. I love that. And that's just about time for us, but thank you so much for coming on. This was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire. It's been such a joy.